Hi, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking edition of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Secrets of Fail series where we're talking to founders, CEOs, and business thought leaders all about the epic business blunders. You know, the stuff they won't put on their LinkedIn timeline unless they're on this series. But anyway, with us in the hot seat today is Patrick Kelly, the CEO of Signal Advisors. Patrick, welcome to the show, brother.
Great to be here.
Cool, dude. So as usual, let's get on with the show. So kick us off with the elevator pitch, bro. What are you guys up to at Signal Advisors?
Yeah, Signal Advisors is a platform for independent financial advisors to build their business on top of. So in the financial advisory world, there's two worlds. There's the captive world, Chase Bank, Northwestern Mutuals of the world, kind of work for a big brand. They give you lots of resources. There's also the independent space where you get to kind of go out on your own and build your own business. And so we help those types of financial advisors scale and build their practices.
Mm-hmm. So what's the issue for them? I mean, what's the problem or the pain that you're typically taking away from them in any given point in time?
I mean, there's lots of things that we do. I mean, it's actually a pretty complicated business. But I mean, one is financing. So there's lots of different ways that we improve cash flow for these advisory businesses. But we've got a proprietary product called TruePay, where we'll pay advisors in 24 hours. So instead of taking about 40 days, we'll pay about 40 times faster than anybody else. So everyone else in the space pays 40 days later. We pay the same day or 24 hours later, depending. So cash flow is a great example. Other piece is just the fragmentation of technology in the advisory space. I think the average advisor uses 17 to 20 pieces of software. When they use our platform, we've consolidated a lot of those tools into one place. So you're probably scaling down to 3 or 4 different pieces of technology. So a lot of benefits, but those are two kind of mine.
Sweet, dude. Amazing business. So let's get on with the meat and the potatoes of this one. What is your story of fail for our audience around the world today?
Of fail. Well, so failure is a weird thing. I think it depends a lot on perspective and the moment in time that you're in. But for me, it wasn't like a divorce or a bankruptcy or any of those kind of like moments in time where you're like, clearly it's a failure. It was more so I started a company as my first company out of college. It was an electronic applications platform for fixed index annuities. So you want to buy an annuity, super complicated, 60 pages of documents, all online, all in paper. And then you're sending these like FedEx overnight packages. It was just a mess. And it was wrong most of the time. So there's a lot of back and forth to try and get these things corrected. So our bright idea was, let's just put those documents online. Let's make it simpler. Let's put some rules behind it. So that was my first business called RepPro. I would say about 5 years into that business, I just had this realization that it wasn't going to be what I wanted it to be. It wasn't really going to be this game-changing business, and we really weren't going to have the financial outcomes that we wanted. So really had to plot our exit. I made a lot of commitments to a lot of people. I recruited team members, employees. I got friends and family to invest in the business. So what do I do? How do I go about getting out of this thing without letting people down? They believed in me from the very beginning. So I spent about 1.5 years actually looking for a buyer. And what ended up happening was DOL came into place. So the Department of Labor, they were basically putting a new rule in place around how basically it was going to put some new constraints on financial advisors and how they conducted business. And so the government was putting new rules in place in the states. And so digital forms became a lot more valuable because basically you could track the decision-making process of why you would buy something. And that's really what the government was trying to understand, was like, why are you actually making this sale? Is it suitable for the customer? And so it wasn't a massive financial outcome. And it took about 1.5 years for me to really kind of like put all of this in place. And we just kind of stuck to it and grinded it out. But we eventually sold the business. And then I worked at that business that I sold to for 3 years after that. All to kind of build Signal Advisors today. So I knew like I was going to go through the suck of like this 4 or 5 year period of trying to figure out how to get out of this thing that I had built. I like built my own prison, if you will. Like how do you get out of that? And so I basically took about 4 years to make sure that I made good on my commitments to the people that invested in me from the very beginning. And it was not what I wanted to do. I think what we would rather do maybe is you'd fold it up. But I just thought that the best way to kind of make sure that our reputation stayed intact, that we made good on the promises that we made to the original people who believed in us, that we went down this path that was definitely painful. That was my failure. Like I said, it wasn't a moment in time where like we had this big failure and calamity. It was more so, wow, I'm stuck in this thing and I don't know how to get out of it. And now I'm going to have to not work to build the company. I'm going to have to work to get this business to a point where I can feasibly sell it. So that was my kind of like big, and it was like a long time too. I think that's the other thing that entrepreneurs do not that well. And there's lots of reasons why, but they just hold on to businesses too long. And a lot of times, they're not going to work, let's say like 3 years in, or maybe even 2 years in, but you just keep on going and keep on going. So I think, you really have to take a hard look in the mirror and figure out, like, it's your time, it's your life. How do you want to spend it? That's why you became an entrepreneur in the first place, probably. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
I'm laughing because it sounds similar to my previous company. It was like we're a media business that generated pipeline for tech brands like Microsoft and Oracle and basically Workday and everyone else, SAP. And it was great because, we were doubling revenues every year for 3 years. And then also year 4 came around, similar story to you. And then I woke up and I was like, fuck, this actually sucks. This isn't the kind of business I want. To scale, it was heavy on people and capital and stuff, and we had products and that, and I was just like, nah, fuck it. It's not for me, dude. And then I also tried to sell it, and unfortunately, and then COVID happened. There's a couple of things. I couldn't get the exit, but I know what it feels like to wake up and, one morning and go, I'm no longer in love with this thing.
It's a weird moment. It's a weird moment because you were obsessed with it at one point in time. At one point in time, it was like the thing that consumed your entire life.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny how quickly it changes, right? And so if you've been, this is why I always say, like, you have to know, to your point, like, entrepreneurs don't get it right a lot of the time, right? And that you should know who you are. Like, are you the type of guy who builds and sells? That's me. I'm no interested in building a unicorn or taking venture capital money. No way. I'm not that guy. But I will build you a house and flip the house to you so you can go build a skyscraper, but I'm certainly not sticking around for 3 years of an earn out and all this kind of rubbish. You know what I mean? Yeah. So fuck that.
Yeah. You got to know who you are for sure.
Yeah, man. So tell me, when you think back about that story, what's a key lesson that you take with you now?
I mean, I think it's about, the key lesson is, I could have realized that way sooner. I was just heads down, and I didn't pick my head up earlier in the process. And I mean, it's tough because sometimes businesses are hard and they take a second to work. It's not always that, like, if it's hard in the beginning, it's gonna be hard at the end. Sometimes you just, it's like a flywheel. You got to put a lot of energy up front, and then eventually it starts moving on its own. But there were definitely signs in that business that it was not going to work the way that I wanted it to, and I just kept on going regardless. And so I could have started that process probably a year and a half earlier, and saved a lot of time. Now at the end of the day, I also just learned so many ins and outs of like venture capital, built a ton of relationships. I mean, so much about what I did in that business is the foundation for the business that exists today at Signal that is just much more successful. So there's lots to take away, but I think there's this sense of awareness of when a business is working or when it's not working. That's maybe nuanced, but I just have such a better feel for it now.
Yeah, it's basically, you have to be qualified by experience, like a genuine, like, all that shit that I went through with a previous company, like I now take forward, like I won't repeat the same mistakes. And I think to have that sort of, massive liquidity event, or even just to imagine for a moment that you have a business that you can see yourself running for like 5 years or 10 years or whatever the story is, then that for me is truly success, right? You don't always have to sell it. I'm that guy, but you don't always have to sell it. But having I call it the QBE, right? Qualified by experience, and you only get that by basically fucking up.
By fucking up and doing, So one of the things that we're a venture-backed business, and one of our investors is Dan Gilbert, who owns Rocket Mortgage and Quicken Loans. It's like you build the largest mortgage origination business in somehow people know you just for the basketball team that you own. So he owns the Cleveland Cavaliers in Cleveland. That's how many people know who Dan Gilbert is. But in Detroit, he's a massive figure because he's been, just responsible for a lot of the revitalization that's happened in the city. And, if you look at Rocket Mortgage, which was formerly Quicken Loans, I mean, so they've been in business for 35 years. And they're in their 35th year. I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but it's directionally accurate, which is like they did more business in their 35th year than they did in the years 1 through 30 combined. Mm-hmm. And it just shows the power of compounding interest. And so when we started Signal, Jake, Kevin, and myself, so I have 2 co-founders in the Signal Advisor business. We kind of locked arms and said, we're going to go at this thing. We feel like this is the right business to go at for 20 years because the market's big enough. And so that's been our game plan. And I just think that given the RepPro experience, I was able to say, okay, this is the right business to really sink our teeth in and do for a long, long time.
So if you could get into the Matt Brown Show time machine and kind of go back, before this whole story, what would you do differently and why?
For that first business with RepPro? Man. What I've done differently with that business. So I would have changed who we sold to. So our original approach on RepPro was to grassroots approach, where it was like, hey, we're going to go get a bunch of users, and then we're going to go use those users to then pound on the door of insurance companies and say, use this product, pay for this product. And so it's because it's kind of this chicken and the egg thing. It's like insurance companies don't want to use the product if there's no advisors, no agents using it. And agents don't want to use it if there's no insurance companies on there paying for it. So the way that we solved it at the beginning was we said, we're going to go upload these forms. We're not going to charge any insurance companies. We'll reduce that friction and we'll go get users. We'll go get financial advisors to use this new process. And that was all fine and good, but if we would have gone to the insurance companies and asked for them to pay for it, I think we could have gotten money up front, which would have funded the business in a more effective way, and we could have actually used the insurance companies as additional distribution. And so I think both of those things we got the distribution of our product wrong in the early days is what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Amazing stuff. Tell me, what's one piece of advice, Patrick, you want to give CEOs or entrepreneurs out there in terms of the importance of failing in business success?
Again, I think it's all about perspective. I think I ran the Boston Marathon. Actually on Monday, I ran it. And I had a terrible knee injury. And I would about 2 weeks ago, I was supposed to run, and it's my first marathon ever. I'm not really a runner. So this is my first time, it was a big deal for me. And I hurt my knee about 3 weeks ago, and I didn't run at all going into the marathon. And I was at that moment in time, I felt like a failure. I thought I was going to drop out of the marathon, actually. I thought I wasn't even going to run it. And so I basically didn't do any work, and no road work, no running. I did nothing for 3 weeks. And then I got out there on the starting line, and I was like, let's go. I'm going to just choose not to quit, and that felt that's why I'm saying it's all perspective. In the moment, 3 weeks before, I just felt like I was failing. I felt like I was going to just crash and burn. And then crossing the finish line at Boston was such an amazing experience. And so I just think it's all perspective. And I think if just taking it back to business, I think if you're still strong on your thesis, then the number one thing you can do is stay alive. Just persevere. And so that would be my number one piece of advice. Persevere. If you believe in your thesis, persevere.
Yeah, very good advice. You got to do that David Goggins vibe, right? Just hell no, brother, I'm going to take your soul, dude.
Yeah, just take the soul. I love that. Yeah, I was listening to a lot of Goggins when I live in Michigan, so I've got some dark winters here. So I had some dark nights alone while I was listening to David Goggins when I was running.
Yeah, man. My mates don't understand me. I'm a suffering guy. I dig it. I go put me on a fucking mountain, dude. No problem. You know what I mean? I'll go and run that shit. No training. Awesome. I ran the other day. It was -15 F. it's very fucking cold for those of you who don't know. Yes. In the cold, dude, off you go. Just because it is mental toughness, right? And I think putting yourself into the Boston Marathon, putting yourself into these situations where you can leave with perspective is sometimes the difference. Because I use this analogy where I'm saying pretty much every entrepreneur, I don't give a shit who you are, how big your company is. Most of you are stuck inside the bottle. Most of us, right? Me too. And so and you can't read the label. So you need perspective to be able to see what you don't see, and I think that's where mentors come in, and investors and people with bigger businesses and masterminds and all these things, your wife, your girlfriend, whatever, it shows you the label. Go, here's what you're not seeing. It's a weird psychological thing. You just don't see it, until one day you wake up, like you said, and you go, this isn't actually for me.
Yeah, I think that's why it's important to pull yourself out of the routine. I think that's also what happened to me is I was just traveling a lot. I was like my slave to my calendar. I just did whatever was on there. And so I think, you kind of pull yourself out. Your kids do that to you. Your wife does that to you. Like running a marathon might do that to you. You kind of pulls you out of yourself, and kind of you can look at the world in a different way, or your business in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Patrick, what about books and tools and resources and things like that? Is there anything that you recommend other CEOs, entrepreneurs use on their journey?
Oh man, so yeah, I love books. I love reading. So we talked about Goggins already. That's a good book, just for if you're want to go through the suck kind of a thing, I call it. But 0 to 1 is probably my favorite startup book by Peter Thiel. I think that's the best startup book out there. There's a book called Conquistadors, which is it's about Hernan Cortez coming over from Spain and kind of taking over the Mayan or the Aztec Empire. And that is the most amazing story about perseverance. It almost is not real, the way you read it, but it's just so amazing. And I recommend it to everybody because it's such a good, it reads like an action novel, but he took over the largest, most sophisticated civilization in the world with almost no resources, and he did it in 3.5 years. And so I often think about that when I'm in my business and I'm struggling. I'm like, life is not hard. Do you know what hard is? I read that book, and it definitely reminds me and keeps me grounded.
Yeah. I'm actually gonna pick that up. I need some bedtime reading, man. All right, cool. Well, Patrick, you're a true legend, man, and thank you for your story of fail, quote unquote. Appreciate you giving your perspective on this series. I know it's certainly resonated with me, man, and I know it'll resonate with my audience too. So I appreciate you for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Anytime, brother. Alrighty. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again soon. Ciao.